Today on Technado, we'll be talking with Joe Holbrook about all things blockchain, as well as the Google Cloud and why you should maybe take a look at that instead of some of the other providers. That's all coming up on Technado, starting right now. Hello and welcome to Technado. I'm your host, Peter Van Rysdam, and I'm joined today by Don Pizzette. Don, how you doing?
I am doing great. Excited for another Technado interview. We've got a good one lined up today.
Yeah, we certainly do. And this is someone that you met at the CompTIA conference recently. So tell us a little bit of backstory there.
Yeah, CompTIA has a partner conference every year. This year happened to be in Washington, D.C. ITProTV is a CompTIA partner. And so we go up each year. It's a chance to meet other professionals and to meet the team over at CompTIA. And they do train the trainers at these events where some official representative of CompTIA will present a new certification so that we all know how we're supposed to teach it and all the material we're supposed to cover. So I attended the Cloud Plus Train the Trainer for the new content, and Joseph Holbrook, or Joe, he was the CompTIA selected instructor that was there. So I had a chance to sit through his presentation, and I talked to him a little bit later and found out he's right over in Jacksonville, Florida, right around the corner. So he agreed to come on our show and do an interview. So it was a neat opportunity, and it was funny to travel, 800 miles to meet somebody who lives 80 miles away.
Yeah, we've run into that before, where we've gone out to Las Vegas for a B-Sides event, and we'll run into people from a company that's down the street, and it's pretty cool. But we've got some insights about blockchain, Google Cloud as well, right?
Yeah, I really wanted to talk to him about Google Cloud because we have a lot of training on AWS, and we have Adam Gordon here, who's a huge Azure expert, but none of us are really in the Google Cloud space. And when I talked to Joe at the conference, he had said how much he loved using Google Cloud, like that platform. We'll see if he still feels that way in the interview.
All right, sounds good. We'll have that interview right after this break.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. ITProTV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide, this is important for me to learn. I would recommend ITProTV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Change the desk and the layout in here, and that's all around doing more interviews, both in the studio and via Skype, and we actually have a great one via Skype today. Don, this is somebody you met at the CompTIA event you went to earlier this year.
Yeah, each year we go to a CompTIA partner conference. This year it happened to be in Washington, D.C., and it's a great chance to meet other professionals that are out there in the industry. I happened to attend the Train the Trainer for the new Cloud Plus certification, and the instructor that was there was Joseph Holbrook, who I had not met before, but I had a chance to talk to him. That's always the great part of going to a conference. You get to meet people. And actually, it was really neat getting to meet him. Turns out that he's from Jacksonville, Florida, which is just around the corner from us, and that he has expertise in a lot of areas that we don't necessarily have here in the building. So it was kind of cool to compare notes, and I thought, what a great interview if we get him on the show and just kind of talk and learn about some different things that are going on out there in the field. And so to that end, we have Mr. Joe on the line with us for today's interview.
Yeah, Joe, why would we continue talking about you? We can just talk to you. So,
Hey, yeah, there you go.
How you doing, Joe?
I'm excellent. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, definitely. So Don mentioned a little bit of what you talked about at the CompTIA event, but looking down your LinkedIn profile, you've got a lot going on. So you're an expert in blockchain,
Yes.
an expert in cloud computing. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this stuff.
Great question. Sometimes things happen by accident or just you see an opportunity and you take it. But basically, I've been in IT for literally 20 plus years. I started actually with HP Unix back in the U.S. Navy. And then I got out of the service and started working in data storage. So I had the opportunity to learn about and actually implement storage area networks worldwide for many companies such as Brocade and EMC, VMware partners as well, a company called Vion, which was literally Hitachi Data Systems Federal at the time. And then after that, it just came down to everybody was talking about the cloud and started asking me about the cloud. So I figured I'd get to know the cloud. And I've been working with AWS for about 5 years, but really got into Google about 2.5 years, and really enjoyed how Google Cloud has started maturing. And then about the last year, I started working a lot with blockchain as well. So that's sort of just a short little background as far as like my experience overall.
Sure. So as Don mentioned, we've got a lot of experience here with AWS, with Azure, and not as much with the Google Cloud. So what drew you to that, and when you kind of got under the hood there, what made you like it so much?
To be honest, I've always been the kind of person that sort of goes away from the crowd, and I've always had niches. Like I knew AWX, AIX, for example, as well as HP Unix. Well, everybody knew Solaris, for example. So I've always been like that niche sort of person, I guess. And so I like Google mainly for 3 main reasons. All right. Well, 2 plus 1 little side reason. The first thing I really appreciate about Google Cloud is that, it's easy to use. It's really easy to understand. AWS, of course, is simple, but the challenge with AWS now is that there's so many services and there's so many little variations to variations. And for example, with AWS, there's over 25,000 line items on a bill. And I was literally helping a customer last year that had literally, I think it was a 1,200 page bill. And that was a blast to go through. But with that said, Google Cloud is just so much simpler. So that was sort of my thought. I felt it was simpler and I could teach it more effective. But also, number 2, the demand is just clearly skyrocketing. It's gotten to the point now where I don't really teach AWS because there's so much demand with Google Cloud, to be honest. And then the third reason is I believe in the leadership of Google Cloud, and they're really making the right investments. And what I mean by investments is the marketing, as well as the training, and also the image, because Google Cloud typically has not done well marketing with enterprises. They've been developer focused. So they're starting to get to know the audience they actually want to sell to. So I see a lot of possibilities.
Let me build on that because you mentioned 2 things there about, one, how Google isn't necessarily the greatest at marketing. I would also throw in they're also not the greatest at talking to their customer. But but you mentioned that demand for that type of training is skyrocketing, and to me, I see there could be 2 possible reasons for that. So 1, it could be that the service is just catching on, a lot more people are adopting it, or 2, it could be that there's an absence of training out there. I mean, if you go and look for people that train on Google Cloud, there's actually not a ton of stuff. You can find a ton of AWS training out there, but on the Google Cloud side, it's a little harder. Do you feel like it's one of those reasons more than the other, or it's kind of even? Like, is Google Cloud really picking up with the enterprise space?
I do see that, and I know that talking to several Google Cloud partners, I guess is how I should say it, they're starting to see the uptick as well. So companies that sell Google Cloud and provide services, are really seeing the demand as well. Now, I'll be honest though, I don't see, from my perspective, like the employee demand. And what I mean by that is like companies, perhaps such as Deloitte or KPMG or Booz Allen Hamilton, that might be hiring for cloud experts, really have that demand for people in-house right now. I don't, again, as a independent consultant in most cases, I don't see that demand anymore because I'm not looking for that. But I can vouch though that companies are definitely looking for trainers, and I've had a couple interesting offers to be honest, to consider. But the reality is it's there. But to sort of make a point, I think the demand is going to definitely pick up because you're correct. There is not a lot of knowledge. And two, I think Google Cloud is starting to get their marketing right. I think the third thing I want to add quickly is that I think Google Cloud is looking to focus on the enterprise now and get that image corrected that you just sort of mentioned as well as me, totally off the cuff, to be honest. Wasn't scripted. So it's interesting that you said that as well. So, yeah.
So how much of that is just marketing versus are there certain types of businesses or specific customers that you think are better suited to be on one cloud versus another based on the type of business that they do? Or do you see them as kind of all created equally and it's just a matter of deciding which platform works for you?
I do see Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure as really targeted use cases in a lot of cases, I guess. What I mean is that, for example, I'll just talk about Google, for example. Now, Google has traditionally marketed platform as a service. They do that remarkably well. Google App Engine, very solid, very well supported. There's a lot of knowledge in Google App Engine. However, infrastructure as a service, AWS is still, the king of the hill, right? There's no argument. When it comes to other services, I think, specific companies that are looking for specific specialized services like machine learning or AI, I think it's a toss-up in a lot of cases between Google and AWS. And my thought on Azure is I'm not sure where Azure fits in because they don't market like I think they used to. It's sort of hard to know, but perhaps that's just a thought. But my whole thought is Google is definitely targeting companies that are software shops. They're targeting retail big time. They're also targeting as well, from my understanding, from partners I've spoken to, the financial sector now, which should be interesting because their compliance requirements are not, in my opinion, up to snuff yet. So
I know, I'm an AWS guy. I got involved with the cloud very early on. Amazon's kind of the market leader, so that's where I went.
Yes.
As it evolved, new competition came out. Microsoft Azure came along, now Google Cloud. And it was easy to turn your back on them in the beginning because they didn't have all the features, right? I knew there were core things I had to have. I had to have some kind of virtual machine hosting like Google Compute. We need some kind of DNS management. We need VPCs or virtual networking of some sort. Like those were core components that you had to have. But AWS had so many other things like the virtual queuing services and storage and so on that it took Azure a little while to ramp up to get to that point, which they did pretty quickly. Google was going through that as well. But I see that lead that Amazon had kind of declining there, that now they're starting to reach feature parity. You mentioned you came from AWS before and kind of moved over to Google Cloud. Are there any services that you found that you miss, like something that you say, oh, I was able to do that on AWS, but I can't under Google, now I got to do a workaround?
So good question. I think, from an EC2 perspective, I think there's more features and functions there perhaps. But I do also believe from a partner ecosystem, AWS has the lead from what I've seen as well. So for example, if you want to spin up specific firewalls, like Palo Alto supported on Google, but I don't believe Checkpoint is at this point, and some of the other third-party marketplace things that you would find on AWS are just not there yet. So Google is, again, it's a work in progress, and I think that's one of the things I would miss. The training, okay, I'll be honest, even as a trainer and one that develops courses, I don't find the documentation with Google to be at the same level. AWS would be here, and Google is still, it's optional. It's like it's like an option. It's not a requirement yet. And no pun intended there. It's just, and this is something I field a lot from students and customers. But Google, of course, talks developers, and developers typically don't like to read. They like to play and they figure things out. So that's why Google, just hasn't really focused on the enterprise market. The other thing is AWS has a very solid community. For example, even in a hick town like Jacksonville, right? Sort of up there with Gainesville, no pun intended. Lots of good fishing and stuff, but the tech community is still evolving. There's actually a few user groups for AWS, but you won't find actually anyone that knows Google here. And if there's a Google requirement in Florida, I typically get the call. So I hope that gave you a few ideas.
Sure. Yeah, and it's an area that is certainly growing. There's plenty of room for cloud providers. I think one thing that the companies are stressing this year in 2018 and definitely in 2019 is this idea of a hybrid cloud where people are deploying solutions in more than one cloud or a mixture of on-premises and in the cloud. Microsoft did a huge presentation on that at MS Ignite this year, really encouraging people to stick with on-premises servers and stuff in Azure. Obviously, you can double up with Microsoft licensing that way, which they love. With Google, do you find they have support that is robust for that, for having like on-prem or even spreading across more than one cloud provider?
That's in a work in progress. So
yeah, it's the latest trend. These things evolve.
Exactly, yeah. So I think your question's pretty good. My answer though is again work in progress, and here's why. So Google does have a hybrid monitoring solution called Stackdriver. Now, that does a pretty good job at monitoring Google Cloud. It does everything for you. If you want to set up AWS, it's, of course, another whole process in itself. You got to create a project in Google Cloud to monitor AWS, which I'm not sure I totally understood that, even though I do it. Leave it to, again, that was probably the direct route to get it done quickly. Now, as far as Google Cloud, for example, I think hybrid cloud is definitely on the roadmap. And yes, you could certainly integrate hybrid solutions with Google, and you could certainly, take your on-prem and extend it to Google. No question about it. Now, again, a lot of the marketplace solutions to help facilitate an AWS are not there in Google Cloud. The one thing I will say is that Google Cloud does have some good tools, like I think it's called VeloStrata is one of them, that will help you onboard to Google Cloud and migrate your VMs, for example. But the on-prem, capacity is still there. But the one thing that I probably should mention that is really a big deal for customers that already have this set up is if you're using like G Suite, for example, you have a rapid capability to federate your identities. It's like almost, built into Google Cloud. And that can really make the administrative burden really easy as well. So just a couple points.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cool stuff to be had there. And sometimes for us, we have to disseminate between what the marketing people are telling us, what we're supposed to see, and what we're actually seeing. And, building on that, let's talk about some of the marketing that's come out of Google. They have obviously done a huge push in the world of Kubernetes and containerized applications. And so that's kind of what we get told from the marketing angle is, hey, you guys really should be doing containerized applications. You can deploy Kubernetes on-prem, in the cloud. You can push your apps super easy, makes continuous deployment super easy. Do you find in the real world, have people already adopted that, or are they still just doing regular virtual machines and throwing things up, and Kubernetes is more of like a in the future type thing? What are you seeing on the ground?
Good question. So I am seeing customers go to like a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. It's definitely, again, though, to point out, this is really more a market segment than like the market as a whole. Like software shops will do that, or larger enterprises that have like a solid software development. They follow best practices like Agile, perhaps former waterfall approaches in the past maybe made them look at going to like a more, friendly approach to rolling out your deployments, for example. But again, it's more software shops that just do that really well. But I am seeing Kubernetes engine. Oddly enough, the last two courses I've taught with Pearson, I can say, for example, people want to know Kubernetes engine, for example. It's definitely an area of interest, to be straight up.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's a big shift from what they've traditionally learned. And so it's something you've got to, for a lot of people are starting from scratch on if you haven't been involved in containers early on. And that, I just find that area changes so fast that I would be scared as a company to deploy that in production right now and rely upon it because it is just changing so fast. We'll have to see where that one goes. Well, we've been focusing on Google Cloud so far, which I find really fascinating because I know it's neat to bump into people that are experts in different products than what we're used to. But you have another title that's stuck onto your name. A lot of times when we see it, you've actually authored some courseware on blockchain and blockchain use, and I know you're pretty active in that space. So let's talk a little bit about that. Peter, I know you had some questions, but let's just kind of start really general. What's some of the work that you've been doing in the blockchain space so far?
Mainly right now, it's enterprise focused. So one of the things to clarify with your audience is a lot of folks seem to think that when you talk blockchain, it means like Bitcoin, right? And so just to make sure, I have my Bitcoin cup and I've had Bitcoin and Litecoin and Monero, you name it. But enterprises are more focused on, the platform, not the cryptocurrencies. And what I'm definitely seeing right now is that companies are doing a lot of proof of concepts. Matter of fact, on my blog posts, I wrote just a proof of concept a blog post just on performing a POC with blockchain, because I think this is where a lot of organizations are considering. And I know one of the organizations, an insurance company up in Madison, Wisconsin, basically is looking at going to a blockchain proof of concept, which is, just for the time being to see how they could get on consortium. And consortium is what? Consortium is basically a group of like-minded organizations that work together to sort of, get software built, for example, when it comes to blockchain software. And we're definitely seeing that, I think, taking an interest. Once again, the blockchain is definitely there. But one of the other things I think you might be interested in is you have permissionless and permission. And now we're starting to see this shift from like Ethereum to like Corda or Hyperledger, for example. And now we're getting blockchains that are starting to change the word blockchain is now it's called a distributed ledger. And what's a ledger? It's a database. So I'm always fascinated by the marketing jargon because, the blockchain was decentralized and now we're going back to what? A centralized platform.
Yeah, I've seen some really bizarre uses for blockchain too, beyond, because I immediately, for the longest time, when I heard blockchain, I thought, financial records, right? You track financial records, and that's why it's great for Bitcoin. It can be used for other things. And when you say ledger's an accounting term, I thought about money. But there was a company that they've been around for a few years now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, StoreJ. And what they did is said, well, why not use blockchain for cloud storage? And you can throw your data up there, and now you've got this immutable storage that has a full ledger of any modifications that are made to it, and you can use it as that cloud type solution. I thought that was really creative, and that was the one that opened my eyes to the fact that, man, blockchain can be used for a heck of a lot more. So you described it there as a database, and if you think about like what can you put in a database? Anything, right? So that leaves it open for companies to get really creative. What are some of the more the most creative example of blockchain use that you've seen so far?
So I think other than the financial industry, because there's a lot of interesting projects that are going on, but one of the ones that I like was basically by the and I forgive me for not knowing the exact acronym that they use, top of my head, but it's by the jewelry industry. And one of the challenges with the jewelry industry is the ability to source and track, for example, where diamonds come from. For example, a lot of the diamonds are sourced from like the Congo, Central Africa is my understanding. And I think the consortium was built by the Bear Diamond Group. And again, there's a term for that. But what's interesting is that they're building this blockchain that's already in, I guess, beta mode to allow customers to order specific diamonds, or when they buy a diamond, to track how it came from point A to point B and give them that logistics. And also, too, that diamond is actually, serialized or like has a CLIN number, so that if you could always go back in the blockchain to validate that diamond was in fact bought 2 years ago from this company. So I think that's pretty creative. But once again, to be fair and honest, the blockchain is still, sort of like, not a toddler, but more of an infant. So it's still evolving, and companies are talking about it, but I haven't seen really any super, valid implementations as of yet.
Now, I saw on one of the many lists of courses you taught and videos you had somewhere it was talking about blockchain use in government. Where do you see the government being able to take advantage of this technology?
Well, the government is probably going to be one of the best customers, because we know that governments in general do two things really, well, and that is they don't budget well, and they don't typically tell the truth. And I'll leave it at that. No politics in this video, of course.
When you said the government does two things really well, I thought we were going to have to get our censor button ready.
Yeah, Don's ears perked up like, oh, really? Yeah. The two things they do really well is not doing things very well. Okay, so how can this help solve those problems?
So what I was trying to get at is, wouldn't it be great if the government was actually held accountable and actually was transparent, right? One of the challenges with any company or any organization, especially governments, is how do we know that our money is being spent appropriately? Or how do we know that these products are being shipped from China are not being shipped from China to Canada and then sold as Canadian goods, right? That would never happen. Now, I do know, for example, some really good government use cases that are being looked at. One is from the General Services Agency. They actually put out a request for proposal last year that might be of interest for folks to take a look at. Another really interesting use case is the sort of like the government country/city of Dubai. Now, Dubai is probably the biggest government in the world that has accepted blockchain 100%. Matter of fact, they've made it to the point where they've mandated all services go to the blockchain. So tax collection over to basically permits for housing, business licenses, which again will be very interesting. And then there's also little use cases, I would say, are actually I guess you call the United Nations like a government, maybe. They act like it, right? But they've got some good use cases of monitoring refugees, making sure refugees are, accounted for, fed appropriately, documented, so on and so on. So there's plenty of great use cases, and I think the government should be the number one benefactor, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe we can look at campaign finance as well and,
Oh,
and track some payments. Where
they'll definitely vote to pass that one. Although, ballot tracking wouldn't be a bad idea, certainly, because, if you tampered with a ballot, it would fail the blockchain validation. So, it certainly could have a lot of uses. While you were answering, I did a quick Google search on the De Beers Diamond Group and found where the product you were describing is called Tracer, TRACR. Yep, that's or it might be Tracker. I don't know how you'd say it, but TRACR that they're using as a blockchain to be able to track the diamonds. And there's actually a competing group, because God forbid anybody standardized on anything, that is using IBM's Trust Chain platform. I know IBM. They have bought into the blockchain concept very, very hardcore. Years ago, they got out of the hardware industry, sold off all their hardware assets. Now they just do software and services. Apparently, blockchain is one of their up and movers. I could really see it kind of solving the voter dilemma. Can we trust our ballots? If there was something like a blockchain in place, that could really work.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you as well is, we're talking with you as a trainer. So if I'm someone that's interested in learning some more about blockchain, are there some skills I should know coming into this? Because I kind of see this like we saw the cloud 10 years ago, where it's that buzzword everyone's talking about, and people that might not be too knowledgeable about it yet say, I want to get involved in that. So where do I start?
Excellent question. And to be honest, a lot of it depends on what you're doing now or what you like to do. But let's just say some of the roles that people could fit in, and then I'll sort of give you some examples of where you go. The first thing is if you're a good coder, if you're already developing in Python or, C++, Golang is very popular, PHP, Node.js. All of these languages that are typically cloud-friendly, web-friendly, for example, usually these developers can literally go more of instead of like a vertical leap, it's more of a horizontal leap for developers, to be honest, because they get the jargon. Because in reality, the blockchain is nothing more than code. It's coding, nothing more than that. Now, architects, what about if you're a cloud architect? So for me, I was a cloud architect. I sold and built tens of millions of dollars of cloud services, data services in the past when I was a pre-sales engineer and services engineer. I can say right now, if you're working in the cloud, a lot of this is transferable, because companies are not going to build their own blockchains. They're looking at services like AWS, for example. Microsoft Azure has great solutions for Ethereum, and soon, I understand, for Hyperledger. So it's called Microsoft Workbench. They offer free services for people to learn. So that would be sort of one of the thoughts I would sort of put out there. And then if, for example, if you're a marketer, it would be simple, right? All you're doing is telling stories, and just tell a different story, right? But generally, architects, the one thing that I think that as a role that might be more challenging is more of like if you're like an enterprise engineer, let's say, working for an enterprise, then I could see that would be a challenge, because again, how does the blockchain actually fit in, right? And where does it fit in now, but where is it going to fit into my ecosystem, right? 10 years down the road, like if you're at GE or, I'm not saying, specific, I'm just giving an example. Like if you're a large enterprise like GE or perhaps CSX or Bank of America or whatever, right? What do you do? How do you understand the blockchain to fit into your company, right? That's the challenge, I think.
All right, so I'm asking you to kind of put on your, future fortune teller hat here, but right now we're seeing the need in the job market for cybersecurity professionals, and security is the big thing that we can't find people in. Do you see that as something that are there going to be just a ton of careers and a big need for blockchain experienced people, or is that a niche and maybe not something that will have that huge demand in terms of the number of people needed to maintain these systems?
I will say, I'll just give you a quick example from what I've seen and what I think may happen. But basically, if you go on LinkedIn, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I did a search for just blockchain in the US. And I think there was over probably 1,800 roles available that had blockchain. Now, I did the same thing about a year and a half ago. There was about 400. So there's a substantial growth there just on LinkedIn. But of course, LinkedIn is just a small part of the picture. But I do see developers getting, hired like crazy. Like their salaries have jumped up if they can develop smart contracts really well. So definitely there. definitely an area. But I do see the blockchain growing, but from a security perspective, to answer your question, sometimes I might have just expanded too much, but just want to just point out, I do think blockchain will grow and security will go with it, but there isn't a lot of knowledge out there yet, to be honest.
So I did have a technical question on the side of like a private blockchain. When we look at a blockchain like Bitcoin, right, which is, I imagine, the biggest blockchain right now, you have thousands, tens of thousands of people that are Bitcoin mining at any given time, right, that are working to validate blocks of the Bitcoin ledger. And they're giving up their CPU power and resources in exchange for occasionally finding a Bitcoin or mining one. So they're basically getting monetary compensation. So they are motivated to validate that ledger. In a private blockchain, if I were to do that privately, it's not like thousands of people or tens of thousands of people around the world are going to volunteer their CPU cycles to validate my chain. Am I going to have to do that myself? Like, am I going to have my own, effectively, Bitcoin miners, but for my own blockchain? And that, I imagine, would severely limit the amount of data I could move through my blockchain, right? It's all basically limited by what you can validate. Is that accurate?
So just to clarify for your listeners, there's two types of blockchains out there, basically approaches to deployment. And it's funny that you brought that up because I'm actually working on a book for pre-sales architects for blockchain and with Wagley Publishing. So that'll be out in January. It'll be done in January, but probably won't be to the market on Amazon until probably June or July. And one of the things that I'm actually going through is documenting exactly what you're talking about. Now, permissionless is different than permissioned. And if you have a permissionless blockchain, typically they're going to use cryptocurrencies or tokens. Now, if you're an enterprise, you're not going to really have the need for cryptocurrencies or tokens. And so therefore the membership, it's basically the membership is the amount of nodes that are on there, for example, or users using the blockchain. And so with the private blockchain, it's significantly different. And it's basically like in Hyperledger, you could have anywhere from a couple nodes to hundreds. It depends on what the enterprise wants. And you don't have a requirement for any cryptocurrencies or tokens. But in a nutshell, I think, there's a lot of flexibility there. What I do like, though, is companies that are using like IBM Hyperledger. Again, it's a consortium, so it's not just IBM, but they do 90% of the work. So let's give them credit. And with that said, you have like a Hyperledger Burrow, which is a very interesting extension to using the Ethereum virtual machines. And I think so basically any possibility that you're thinking of, Don, will be out there if it's not already there. So that's just my thought on it.
That helps out a lot because in my mind, I was always thinking public blockchains, right, where any Joe Blow on the internet could submit a transaction on a public blockchain. But the way you're describing it, if it's a private blockchain, then you have to be authenticated to even write to it in the first place. We don't necessarily need to be validating at that same level. That makes a lot of sense. I'd never even occurred to me.
Yeah. So there's permissionless and permissioned. Enterprises use permissioned. However, they typically can extend to like the Bitcoin payment gateways, for example. So they could be a hybrid blockchain. So since we're talking about hybrid cloud, let's talk about hybrid blockchain. And that's a perfect use case. I'm seeing companies right now looking at extending to payment gateways that are using cryptocurrencies. And again, this is something that's going to happen and is being already in process, as well. Is it production ready? No, but it's definitely out there.
Yeah, well, Joe, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of let us know about how people can find you if we want to learn more about this. I know you're on Medium, you've done a lot of training, and then we've got your blog as well. You're the tech guy over on Steemit. That's STEEMIT, Steemit.com. Search for the tech guy. What else do you have going on right now? Anything else you want us to know about?
Sure, I'd love to tell you some more. Basically, what I have been working on is definitely a brand new book that's coming out here in the spring and early summer. It's going to be on blockchain architecture with Wiley Publishing. Wiley is definitely one of the top 2 or 3 technical publishing, outfits out there. So really excited about that. And I actually got that deal through the CompTIA conference as well. So one of the things I always encourage learners is to go out there and just go to events and meet people and let people know you're interested in learning more. But as far as what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get the word out there. I'm also a big fan of IT Pro Camp, which is I know you all are familiar with as well. So working on some things for this summer as well here in Jacksonville and perhaps other cities, hopefully. And then as far as courses I'm teaching, definitely cloud and blockchain. Google Cloud has really, like I said, took up a lot of my time. But I'm definitely looking forward to working with hopefully some of your folks down the road as well. Meet and greets at different events down the road. So
yeah, definitely. And you have a website too that you mentioned is coming out probably before the end of 2018. MyBlockchainExperts.com. What is that?
Yes.
Kind of information about the consulting and services you offer.
Actually, that's an e-learning platform. It's funny because I sort of have the courses ready to go and developed on the back end. It's just a question of extending it to the front end. And I'm trying to build, and one of the things I'm not good at is web development. And I hacked a few things and I decided I got to have someone fix it. I'm just not, I don't have the time to deal with this. And so basically it's going to be an e-learning platform along with the community. One of the things I'm a big believer in is having a community of like-minded professionals with Google Cloud or blockchain or Amazon, whatever that community is focused on, is to help drive participation, but also to help other people get their questions answered and anything of that nature. So it's going to be a quasi extension e-learning platform with a twist of side marketing, I guess, for myself as well. Because I do a lot of video courses as well. So with that said, I'd love to have a platform where people can go for free to learn a few new things here and there as well, and have that community built.
Will you be hosting that on the Google Cloud?
Actually, the answer is no. My new blog is on Kinsta, which is actually hosted by Google. I love Kinsta because, and if you haven't been to kinsta.com, I think it is, or kinsta.org, they're a WordPress hosting site. They do great articles on Google Cloud, and their availability is like literally the best out there. But so I do actually have a couple websites that I use for training actually on Google Cloud as well. So yeah.
All right. Well, your credibility is back then,
yes.
As far as I'm concerned. Well, Joe, we want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I know, you're busy. You've got so much going on. We've got some weather heading our way here in Florida, so got a lot going on. So definitely stay safe with that. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, we've got some more Technado coming up right after this, so stay tuned.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used ITProTV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without ITProTV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
All right, welcome back to Technado. That was a pretty interesting interview because I've heard a lot about Azure, I've heard a lot about AWS because we talk about the different stories about Kubernetes and all the new data centers opening, but we really don't talk about Google Cloud that much. And it doesn't have that much of a market share, I guess.
Yeah, it's gaining. It's certainly not a lead player. Google knows that, but it's been growing a lot. So I always thought it's really cool anytime I encounter somebody who uses a technology different than what I use, because it's a chance for me to learn, hey, maybe there's a reason I should try this out, especially one like Google Cloud, where I've tried it out in the past and didn't like it. Now maybe I look at it again in the future. I'm really hoping we can arrange to have Joe come down here to the studio and maybe record some training on Google Cloud, and we can really benefit from it. So we'll see where that goes in the future.
When did you try it out? When it first came out?
Okay, yeah, back at the very beginning.
Yeah, so it's probably completely different now. So that'll be interesting to get in and play around with a little bit. Well, that was a great interview, but I guess that's pretty much going to do it for us today on Technado. We have a couple things we want to let you know about. First of all, if you're interested in finding out more about ITProTV, whether for yourself or for your business, check us out over at ITPro.tv, and we've got a special coupon code for you here, Technado30. If you want to get a personal subscription, that'll get you 30% off, and we've got a lot of business plans as well you can learn more about over here on this site, so definitely take a look at that. And we've also got some other educational opportunities coming up. We just had a webinar about pen testing tools that'll be archived and up on our website very shortly at itpro.tv/webinars, but we've got a couple coming up that you're doing, Don. I think the next one is jumping clouds, AWS to Azure. So speaking of clouds, we're getting right back into that. What are you talking about on this one?
Well, a lot of people have deployed in AWS. They're the market leader, but Azure is caught up. And so people are starting to look at, hey, should I move my technology over to Azure? Should I stay at AWS, or should I go hybrid cloud and deploy in both? So we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of those different scenarios, what it looks like, whether it's feasible, whether you should consider it, whether it's okay to ignore it. Largely, the answer to all of those questions is yes. It's just whether it's yes for your environment. So that's what we're going to look at in that webinar.
And I bet our next one will be going back from Azure to AWS, depending on what you're doing, playing with who's got the best deal at the time. But that podcast is on Thursday, October 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be Don with Wes hosting there. And then we've got another podcast another webinar rather, that I'm really excited about coming up at the end of the month on October 30th. And I guess this is with your brother, Don, just Ron Bazette.
That's right.
That's right. Because
we're
going
the infamous Ron Bazette.
Ron Bazette, because we're going incognito. We're going on the dark web. That's going to take place Tuesday, October 30th at 2 p.m. We're going to look at the dark web and talk about how to see if your data is out there on the market. So pretty exciting stuff, and I think we'll have a lot of interest in that and a lot of fun in that one, being right around Halloween, but it's nice and spooky. Well, Don, any final thoughts before we close here?
With IT, we just keep an open mind, learn new technologies. It's a lot of fun. I encourage people to go to conferences like I do, because it is a chance to meet people, get a different perspective, and keep watching Technado, because that's what you'll get a chance to see.
Yeah, and if you see us at those events, say hi, because we're always looking for new people to bring on for interviews here, because that's a great way to get your message out and get some unique perspectives like the one we had today. So thank you so much for joining us on Technado, and we will see you next time.
Are you enjoying Technado? Then be sure to check out our other podcast, Ask Me Anything, where our subject matter experts answer your questions. Here's the latest episode, and here's the full playlist. And as always, be sure to subscribe to ITProTV's channel. ITProTV!